set the timer.
Loud and proud.
Yeah. So shall I start now? I'll set the timer and I'll go now.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be exactly 10 minutes, but then and thereabouts.
Yeah. So. Sure, yeah. I'm not a time Nazi, Discernible, so like if you go over by 1 or 2 minutes, it's no big deal.
Okay.
Okay,
right,
so your time starts.
Can I start?
Your time starts, yeah.
Okay, cool. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to everyone who is here, especially to Discernible and Jace for the moderating duties. And also a special thank you to the Rotorua chapter of Black Power for the crowd control. So, trolls, even if you think of causing problems, you better text Jace and apologise. Excuse me. As the debate topic is about the incoherency of atheism, I'm going to be arguing for the affirmative and articulating just how much the intellectual cost of believing in atheism is. You can see in the chat there's a lot of links here to studies and sources which reveal that atheism is linked to emotional suppression, suggesting that atheists restrict emotional expressions more than religious individuals, which impacts their social interactions and their perceived untrustworthiness. Additional research indicates that, as well as suppressed cognitive styles, there are some cultural factors often at play that influence a belief in atheism. Furthermore, studies on the psychological well-being of atheists reveal that social stigma and discrimination can lead to negative mental health outcomes, highlighting the challenges faced by atheists. And I'm just going to briefly mention these negative mental health outcomes. For atheists, these negative outcomes are reflected in studies that show in the USA, atheists are often viewed with significant distrust that those polled compared atheists to that of rapists. Many people perceive atheists as more likely to engage in immoral or criminal behaviour, leading to a perverse stigma against them. This negative perception contributes to social and even political challenges for atheists, including reluctance on the general public to vote for an atheist as a candidate, and a belief that they lack a sufficient moral compass. Next, further research shows that, this is a bit of a tough one, further research shows that suicide rates are significantly higher amongst atheists compared to Christians. Studies indicate that individuals with no religious affiliation report more lifetime suicide attempts and suicide ideation than Christians. For example, unaffiliated individuals have a higher mean score on suicidal ideation scales compared to their religious counterparts. Additional data from various studies show that religious beliefs provide a protective factor against suicidal behaviour, contributing to lower suicide rates amongst Christians. As University of Tucson's Michael Jones argues, that the intellectual cost of atheism is fundamentally linked to moral rebellion rather than general intellectual doubt. He posits that atheists often try to rationalise their rejection of God to justify immoral and poor behaviour, which suggests that their arguments against God only serve as a facade or a veneer for deeper moral issues. It is asserted that individuals that commit wrongdoings face a choice, and the choice is this: either align their actions with an objective moral law that's external to human influence, or, and this is what many atheists do, they adjust the moral law to fit their actions in an attempt to rationalise their beliefs. Excuse me. Man, what a time to get a cough. So I'm just going to finish up here with another reason why atheism is incoherent is because atheists steal from the theist worldview all the time without even knowing it. All right. Okay. So in conclusion, atheists often borrow elements from the Christian worldview, particularly in areas like morality, logic, reasoning, and meaning. For instance, the atheist will rely on the absolute rules of logic to argue against God. So that immediately presupposes them having a framework that is consistent with theism, but not atheism. Additionally, concepts such as human rights and objective moral values and duties are rooted in Christian teachings. Yet many atheists utilize these concepts without acknowledging their origins. This borrowing highlights the inconsistency within atheistic perspectives as they operate under principles that align far more closely with a Christian framework, and kind of, in a sense, earmarks them as cherry picking hypocrites, because in their normal daily affairs of living, they do act like God does exist. And that'll be all from me for now. I'll just hand it over to my learned opponent.
Okay. Discernible. You got your notes? You ready to go?
Yeah, one sec. I want to try sharing my screen.
You got 10 minutes. Your time starts whenever you're ready.
Okay. All right. So the debate resolution was atheism is incoherent, and I'm here for the negative side. The first thing I want to do is clarify what we might mean by incoherent, right? Of course, it just doesn't mean false, because fictional stories are false, but they can be coherent. Yeah, this means the debate is not over whether or not atheism is true. To be incoherent can mean contradictory in either logical or performative senses, or it can mean unintelligible. So I'd expect an argument for the claim that atheism is incoherent to establish at least one of these three conditions. I would expect an argument for one of these conclusions. The proposition God does not exist logically entails P and not P. The proposition God does not exist can't be asserted without conflicting with the conditions of the claim. Or the proposition God does not exist has no determinate inferential relations or conceptual content such that it's meaningless, like blah, blah, blah. So in second, there's the issue of like multiple versions of atheism, right? Like, is atheism a worldview with its own particular answers to philosophical questions? Or is atheism an isolated proposition, like God does not exist, or I lack belief in gods? So can any of these views be shown to be incoherent in the sense I just listed, in any of those three senses? So first, consider atheism as like an isolated statement, right? Compare it to someone denying the existence of the moon. We can say a lot about what this would and wouldn't entail and how silly it is. One undeniable entailment from this claim would be that the moon's gravity does not cause tides, right? The moon does not exist as a ridiculous claim, but it does entail this, that the moon's gravity does not cause tides. Now, when someone says that God does not exist, this definitely has a negative, the entailment that morality is not grounded in God's nature. So denying that the moon causes tides doesn't have a particular alternative account of tides. And in the same way, denying that morality is grounded in God's nature does not entail a particular positive account of morality. If there's no positive claims entailed by God does not exist, then there's no claims to form a contradiction. Any and all further claims an atheist makes would be merely compatible with the claim God does not exist, not entailed by the claim. And so any contradictions would be the result of an individual thinker's error, not built into atheism. So atheism as a single claim is definitely coherent. God does not exist does not entail a logical contradiction. God does not exist entails no particular positive claims about the condition of the claim, and so there can't be a conflict or a performative contradiction. And the claim is meaningful in that it entails negative claims, such as morality is not founded upon God's nature. Right. So atheism, in this sense, as a single claim, is definitely coherent and easily shown to be so. All right. But the second thing we have to talk about is atheism as a worldview. I think this could mean one of two things. So I think, like, when we talk about atheism as a worldview, it could just be the beliefs of some particular atheist. It could also be like a view developed to avoid implicit references to God, that negative claims such as God does not ground morality may still allow for implicit references to God. So atheism as a worldview, it could be one of these two things: beliefs of some particular atheist, or a view attempting to describe the world specifically without any possible reference to God. So I'm going to talk briefly about Alex Rosenberg's book, The Atheist's Guide to Reality. So in Rosenberg's book, to be an atheist is to accept the claim that physics is the whole truth about reality. This commitment to the truth of the whole is what motivates his claim that an atheist's view must not only be compatible with scientific theories, but must be determined by them. To be thus determined is to accept claims such as the physical facts fix all the facts, and evolution has shaped us to be nice nihilists. This is a worldview in the normal internet debate sense of the term, in that it involves claims about what there is, how we know what there is, and what we ought do. So we might have many criticisms of Rosenberg's view, right? One very intuitive criticism of his book is its eliminative physicalism, in which intention plays no explanatory role in his theory of mind. This is just to say that thinking is not thinking about. This can be formulated as a performative contradiction, one of the candidates for incoherence I already mentioned. So when we eliminate intention from our explanation of theory of mind, we might get a strange sentence like this: Rosenberg is thinking about the fact that Rosenberg does not think about facts. So listeners may or may not think this is absurd, right? Not really here to pick a fight over eliminative materialism. I'm not sure what I think about it myself. I only mention this as an example of the belief of some particular atheists being more or less convincing, and not necessarily relevant to other atheists. Attacks on Rosenberg's physicalism are not necessarily of any consequence to the rest of us, and so can't be used to establish that atheism is incoherent. Now, maybe the more important claim is his appeal to the whole truth about reality. While we might not currently have such complete knowledge, he takes the possibility of such knowledge, or at least the idea of it, to be necessary for an atheist worldview. So I think this might be an example of some implicit backdoor notion of God that could undermine a claim to strict atheism. I want to compare this to Spinoza, right? Who published his Ethics in 1677, where he argued for a pantheistic identification of God and nature as a single substance. Despite the entire first part of the book being titled Of God, and constant references to God throughout, one of the most famous criticisms of the book referred to it as a form of atheism, right? This author, Friedrich Jacobi, said the identification of nature and God was pure materialism and could only ever end in atheism. Now, maybe Jacobi was right, maybe he was wrong. But Spinoza's world is a causally closed and causally complete whole, just as Rosenberg's is. Just as Spinoza's pantheistic religiosity could be read as a form of atheism, Rosenberg's atheism could be read as a form of pantheistic religiosity. The whole that Rosenberg sees physics describing has traditionally been taken to be synonymous with the God's eye view on the world, the totality viewed from the outside. This whole doesn't appear in experience, it only appears in theory as an expected projection. To say that it exists, I think, is to allow a certain notion of God to be backdoored in. So I offer this as an example of how the purely negative claims, such as God did not create the world, God is not the moral author of the world, that these purely negative claims aren't always sufficient to escape implicit divinity. So a final part of my opening is a sketch of an atheist view that tries to avoid such implicit divinity. So Rosenberg says physics is causally closed and causally complete. This is going to involve something like a principle of sufficient reason, which says all facts, beings, and events have sufficient conditions for existing and existing as they do. An exceptionless principle of sufficient reason needs to avoid an infinite regress of reasons, because this regress itself could never be explained on pain of adding another infinite regress. Without this exceptionless PSR, Rosenberg's idea of a causally closed and causally complete whole is a pure assertion. So I can think of three ways to avoid the regress. The first way is to deny relations between particulars. I'm not going to talk about this much because this is like I think the crazy route that has to deny experience. So the second is a being that is its own explanation, a necessary being, the object of the ontological argument. And here we can just rehearse the most basic response to the ontological argument. Contradiction can only obtain between an existing subject and one of its predicates. Deny the subject, and there's no contradiction, regardless of how you try to predicate it. The third way is just to deny the PSR and assert that events can take place in the absence of antecedent sufficient conditions, such as the coming to be or passing away of particular things. The existence and non-existence of every particular being in law, from my computer to gravity, from Russia to God, would be without a necessary reason, and as such, capable of passing away without a necessary reason. So this is the position I would offer as like a consistent atheism, or something like a consistent atheist worldview. The contingency or capacity to be otherwise of all particular beings. The appearance of subjectivity or life or any other event that seemingly cries out for a supernatural explanation may have no sufficient condition at all. They're perfectly capable of being contingent, chaotic violations of the principle of sufficient reason, breakages in the causally closed world we experience ourselves as inhabiting. And this world is capable of being coherent, right? There's no necessity to these changes. Regularities can perfectly well exist alongside the non-existence of necessity. So all of this is to say that way back at the beginning, when I brought up my three conditions for something to be incoherent, one, that it entails a logical contradiction, or that it entails a performative contradiction, or three, that it has no meaning, atheism as a single claim easily passes that test. In atheism that does not attempt to describe real necessity or backdoor in some kind of God, also easily passes that test. So it's very simple to show that atheism is coherent, and I think I did that. So that is it for my opener.
Right, now we'll have 10 minutes each of rebuttal, cross-examination of each other. And then after that, we'll be able to see where we head. But Gavin, if you're ready, your time starts now. Are you ready to go?
Just tell me when to go.
Okay, so your time starts. Yep,
okay,
your time
cool.
starts.
Thanks for that, Discernible. Now, Discernible, as an atheist, you are an atheist, do you think that God doesn't exist?
Well, I think a necessary being doesn't exist. And a moral author of the a necessary being and a moral author of the world does not exist.
Can you answer the question in a straight way, please? As an atheist, do you believe God does not exist? Do you think God doesn't exist?
Yeah, sure, God doesn't exist.
Okay. Do you have all possible knowledge?
No.
Okay. There's your first contradiction. Thank you for conceding the argument. You've made a claim that God does not exist, but you lack all possible knowledge. So there's your first contradiction.
What's the contradiction?
To show, did you not get that?
I would expect a contradiction to be like P and not P. The same sentence twice.
No,
but once with the word not in front of it.
Sir. You've made a claim God does not exist. You've also admitted to the fact that you do not possess all possible knowledge. And for your claim God does not exist to be true, you would have to possess all possible knowledge. That is a contradiction, sir. Thank you for turning up, but you concede the debate. Now, you also said in your opening statement that atheism, or God does not exist, was easy to show. Your very words were easy to show. So please, sir, take your time and show us the evidence that God does not exist.
Oh, to be clear, the thing I said that was easy to show is that atheism is coherent, right? On those three conditions I gave. One, doesn't entail a logical contradiction. Two, doesn't entail
Sir,
a
you're not
formative
listening to me
contradiction.
properly. Listen closer. Listen closer. You said in your opening statement that atheism was easy to show.
Discernible's opening, quote 1.
So atheism, in this sense, as a single claim, is definitely coherent and easily shown to be so.
Discernible's opening, quote 2.
So it's very simple to show that atheism is coherent, and I think I did that.
What the hell, Gavin?
You've admitted that atheism to you is God does not exist without you knowing all knowledge. Now I'd like you to back up your statement that atheism, as in God does not exist, is easy to show. Please show your evidence.
Just to be clear, that is certainly not what I said in my opening statement.
Yeah, it is, sir. And don't lie. Don't lie.
I'll post my script if you want. Yeah, give me 1 second.
So you're not
I'll post
going to show evidence.
The relevant paragraph.
Sir, you're not going to show evidence. Can you stop talking? This is a formal moderated debate. So when one side is talking, the other side only talks when they're asked a question. Right? That's how it goes. This is not a VC atheist debate. So you're not going to show this evidence that you believe is easy to show atheism, that infers God does not exist. You're not going to show that to us.
So I posted my opening paragraph in side chat.
Sir, can you answer my question?
Yeah, because your question is not about the debate topic. I'm happy to just have a discussion about the truth of atheism. The claim,
but
you're saying I made a claim I did not.
Hey, you made the claim that it is easy to show atheism. And you made the claim that atheism to you... Can you be quiet?
But you're telling me I said something I didn't say.
We may have to mute you so I can speak properly.
I mean, it's also on recording. What the hell?
Yeah, can you mute this guy, Jace, so I can just get out what I'm trying to say?
Hey, Discernible, I'll give you an opportunity. Just let him get it out. Like, if he asks you a question, answer. But other than that, just let him rebut you.
Okay, but like this is a waste of time. Like I posted my first paragraph in side chat. And
yeah, you're wasting my time.
My argument was clearly not.
That's for sure.
It was clearly
because you
not.
Have no argument.
Atheism is true.
So can you mute this idiot, please, Jace, so I can finish my cross-examination?
Discernible, can you let him get it out? Can you let him finish? You able to do that without me reading you?
But I'm not going to answer any more loaded questions, just so we're clear.
Okay, fair enough. Yep, okay. Carry on, Gavin.
Sure. So, Discernible, you made the claim that it was easy to show that atheism, i.e. God does not exist, that's easy to show. That's your claim. You've already admitted that God does not exist, but you don't possess all the knowledge to make that claim supported by any evidence. So now I'm asking you to show your evidence for why atheism is easy to show. And if atheism is easy to show, then that would go a long way towards showing that atheism is not incoherent. There you go.
I made no such claim, and the truth of atheism is not my burden in this discussion.
Wow. What an O.J. Simpson dodger. You're a liar and dodging the question. Anyway, we'll just move on.
It's not my burden.
We'll just move on and just ignore your ignore your lack of professionalism. Okay, how much more time have I got? Jace, please, quickly.
4 minutes.
4 minutes, okay. I'm going to finish with this. I wasn't going to use this, but I think this will be helpful for you, Discernible, and for the audience. Okay, this is a modus ponens argument. Modus ponens means that if the first two premises are true and correct, then the conclusion is highly likely to be correct. Premise one. If atheism is true, then all aspects of reality can be explained solely by naturalistic and materialistic processes. Did anyone miss that, or do they want me to repeat it? Okay. I'll just quickly say it again. Premise one. If atheism is true, then all aspects of reality can be explained solely by materialistic and naturalistic processes. That's true. So tick for that. Premise two. Science, philosophy, theology affirms that solely naturalistic and materialistic processes cannot, just to emphasize it, explain all aspects of reality. That is true. So my first two premises are true, which means the conclusion is highly likely to be true. And the conclusion is atheism is false. So how much time is left for me, Jace, please?
A minute if you need it.
Yeah, I'll just while away the time.
Wait, is
So we've
that
got a
opening
modus
statement
ponens
part 2? Is there a
argument
question
here
for me here?
rock solid. Can you be
Is there any
quiet?
question?
Is there a question,
this
or is
guy
that
be
opening
quiet,
statement
please?
part 2?
Can you mute this guy after repeated warnings, please?
Discernible. Come on.
This is why
Okay.
atheists can't debate. This is exactly why they can't debate. So, in the time that I've got left, atheists cling obsessively to materialism, physicalism, and materialism, simply because they don't believe in anything unseen, like the supernatural or the metaphysical. They believe that reality is only made up of the physical, the natural, and the material. But this is not what science and philosophy concurs to. They don't believe that the reality is actually made up solely of the physical, the material, and the natural. So, if there's agreement and consensus in science and philosophy on that particular point, then atheism must be false. It can't be true. So, I'll yield there, I guess. My time must be up.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, so before I respond to your opening statement, I'm curious, Gavin, do you have a favorite fictional story?
That's got nothing to do with the debate.
Well, it's
Carry
a question.
on. It's not related to the debate, so carry on.
Okay, are you familiar with? Can you name a fictional story you're familiar with?
A fictional story.
That you're familiar with.
You wanting me to say something like,
Oh my God, Lord of the Rings?
I know
Do you know
of
Lord of the
the
Rings?
Can you not overtalk me? I said Lord of the Flies is a fictional story.
Okay, cool.
If you're going somewhere with this, can you do it, in a hurry?
Is Lord of the Flies coherent?
As far as I can remember, it's years since I read it.
Is it true? Is it a true story?
No, I'm pretty sure it's a fictional story.
Yeah, so something can be false and coherent, right?
Wow, Einstein, that was brilliant.
Exactly. And the question of the debate is atheism coherent? Not, is atheism true?
No. The debate topic is atheism incoherent?
Mm-hmm. And Lord of the Rings Lord of the Flies was a coherent story, but false.
Which has got nothing to do with the title.
And the question is,
Of the
atheism
debate.
is incoherent. atheism can be coherent and false, of course, right? But the question isn't whether atheism is true or false, it's coherent versus incoherent.
Yes. And people don't build their lives and obsess and have debates on Lord of the Flies.
Okay, I'm glad we've
So
established
can
that.
you get to a point, please, and do it pretty quickly?
Well, I made my point, right? We're talking about coherence, not truth.
Wow.
But anyways, I'll talk about your opening statement for a little bit. So your opening
Yeah,
statement
sure,
spoke a lot about
sure.
like the position that atheists have in society, right? They're more suicidal, they're more untrustworthy, etc. Of course, this may all be true.
That's what the data shows. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what the data
of course,
shows.
this may all be true. But I'm not sure what this
Yeah.
has to do with.
Hey, by the way, did you bring any evidence? Did you bring any evidence?
Well, I'm willing to grant that all of your empirical claims are true.
Sir, can you answer my question? Did you bring any evidence?
No, I didn't bring evidence. I'm just willing to grant that
Okay, that's
atheists
fine.
are
That's
out there
fine. That's
killing
fine.
themselves left, right, and center.
Whatever you say, I'm just going to treat as your subjective opinion.
Okay,
You have no evidence.
yeah,
Okay.
it's my subjective opinion that everything you said about atheists and their position in society is correct. Sure, they're out there killing themselves left, right, and center. That's cool. Yeah, cool.
Can you get on? Can you get on with a coherent argument, please?
Yeah, thank you. The position of atheists in society doesn't have anything to do with whether or not a claim like God does not exist is coherent, right?
It actually is. It actually is. When the atheist says God doesn't exist, they're making a claim that they know God doesn't exist, yet they don't have all knowledge.
What does that have to do with
So that's
the
a
suicidality of
contradiction.
atheists?
That's a contradiction. So you fall flat on your face at the starting line.
But
Thanks for playing.
how is infinite versus finite knowledge related to suicidal ideation?
The studies show, as you can see, and all the evidence I've provided, that atheists have a significantly higher level of suicide than Christians.
Right, and what does that have to do with the coherency of atheism?
Well, if atheism was coherent, you would probably expect to see far less suicides. Would you not agree?
I don't see what one has to do with the other.
Yeah, of course you don't. Of course you don't. Well, you can have that worldview if you like, but it's not coherent.
Well, in my opening statement, I gave 3 examples for what I would expect like incoherence to be, right? 1, establishing logical contradiction, 2, performative contradiction, or 3, some kind of meaninglessness. Do you have a different idea of what incoherence is? You know, when you say atheism isn't coherent, what do you mean by that?
No, we're not going to go down the rabbit hole of semantics about a word. This is the typical atheist defense.
Well, I
I
gave 3
pointed out.
possibilities.
Excuse me, sir. Sir,
I
excuse me.
gave
I'm
3
answering your
possibilities. I'm wondering
question.
if you agree or disagree.
I'm answering your question, sir.
Well, you just said you're not going
I
to.
pointed out the contradiction right off the bat. So one contradiction is enough to show that you don't have an argument. Sorry.
And what was that contradiction again?
Seems everyone remembers it except you. What a way to wind down the clock. You make the claim that God does not exist, yet you don't possess all knowledge to make that claim with any surety.
I'm missing the contradiction.
You understand? You understand?
Yeah, I'm missing the
You
contradiction.
don't see a contradiction. My God.
No, I don't see one.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine.
Okay. I'm curious, Gavin. Do you think God is capable of contradictions?
The debate is not about God, Discernible. Can you stick to the topic, please?
Are contradictions possible?
You mean in our ordinary daily affairs?
Yeah, let's say are contradictory objects possible, like a square circle in a very simple sense?
Yeah, contradictions are possible. I know where you're going with this, so, speed it up so we can open it up to questions.
Oh, if you think contradictions are possible, I am surprised, and you've headed me off at the pass. Yeah, actually, I'll cede the rest of my time there.
Okay, so now if anyone has any questions, Gavin, do you have anything else you want to say before we open it up?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say, and this is for everyone, for every unbeliever in the audience and for Discernible. Again, I'll repeat this modus ponens argument that you cannot defeat. You cannot defeat this because the first two premises are true and correct and sound. Therefore, the conclusion is most likely to be sound, correct, and true. Premise one, if atheism is true, that God does not exist, then all aspects of reality can be explained solely by naturalistic and materialistic processes. This is the atheist claim. But premise two says science, philosophy, and theology affirms that solely naturalistic and materialistic processes cannot explain all aspects of reality. Those are two true, sound, and accurate statements. So therefore the conclusion, atheism, can you be quiet? Mm-hmm. Therefore the conclusion most likely is true, highly likely to be true. And the conclusion is atheism is false. If it's false, it's incoherent.
Yeah, how embarrassing. I forgot to respond to that because it wasn't in the opening statement notes, because it wasn't a part of the opening statement. I'm sure everyone that was here will remember the last third of my opening statement was giving over to rejecting premise one of what Gavin just said. So I deny the soundness of his argument.
Good for you.
So let's open it up to the room now to ask questions.
Sure.
Does anyone have any questions in regard to this?
Yeah, I have a comment. There is such a thing as a square circle, and I posted it in the side text channel.
Sure, I realize there is in a sense, but I would say a single 2D figure that has both 0 corners and more than 0 corners. Right?
Yeah, that's what I posted in the side text channel.
Well, I count 1, 2, 3, 4 corners. That's not 0 corners. Right? I think everybody can look at the picture and count 1, 2, 3, 4 corners.
So what are you implying? Can you elaborate on the picture, EJ, and what you're implying and how this is useful for this argument?
Oh, it's only because he said there's no such thing as a square circle, and I'm showing him there is such a thing as a square circle by posting an image of a square circle.
And to be real clear, that's just shorthand for a single 2D image that has both 0 corners and more than 0 corners at the same time, which is definitely not what you posted, right, Ed?
I posted a square circle.
Does it have 0 corners?
Like I said, I posted a square circle.
Yeah, but
it's a 2D representation, discernible. Of
certainly, everyone can look at the picture and count 1, 2, 3,
discernible,
4 corners.
Discernible, right? Discernible.
I mean, I don't want to waste too much time on
while
this.
I speak. You might have to be muted while I speak.
Yeah, with atheists, it comes down to arguing semantics, but there it is, a square circle.
So it's a 2D image of a square circle. Do you guys get this?
Yeah, well, it'll just come down to whether or not you believe you or the listeners will believe either you or their lying eyes, whatever.
Ooh. Just lay off the personal attacks. This is typical atheist
That was not a
rhetoric.
personal attack.
Yeah, it is. It is. So anyway,
Well, who's the
I've got a
atheist here?
question for you. I've got a question
It's
for
me,
you.
Discernible.
Sorry, who was speaking? Okay, so the atheist is actually Discernible. Is
I
the
see.
guy who has been debating this. Now, I've got a question for Discernible, but I want to know if I want everyone else to get their questions out first.
Well, I have a
I'm
question.
moderating. Yeah.
All right,
So
I'll
why,
save my question for later. Jace, I'll save my question for later.
You can ask first. I can ask after you. Okay.
All right, Tucker, go
Okay.
ahead.
So why are you an atheist?
Well, I call myself an atheist for two reasons. One, I don't think there's a necessary being, a being that has to exist and exists the way that it does. And two, I don't think there's like a moral author of the world, some kind of eternal repository of values and laws.
Yeah, I can disprove atheism pretty easily.
Wait,
Hold on, let him finish.
Okay.
So your point is you don't see the evidence for a God.
Well, like while it's true, I don't see something I would call evidence for God. That's like I think evidence would be like an empirical matter, and I don't think the term really fits for God. I don't know what evidence for God would be.
Well, what about order and design? And you probably heard of that many times, but it's a pretty major point. What about the order and design of the entire universe?
Sure, what would be an example of like disorder, of not ordered?
Hydrogen not coming to be. For example, the atoms that would make the molecules of hydrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, and those molecules come together to make their own elements like water. I mean that's pretty orderly, I'd say. I mean, having a bunch of atoms come together to make more bigger things that work in such complex manners.
Yeah, so
That's
my
just one
response
piece.
to
The universe is also another piece, but
yeah, so my response to like fine tuning and design arguments is always going to be like one that the explanation, there has to be an explanation of why the world was designed the way that it was, and that explanation is going to be like is going to be just as mysterious, right? Like why did God create oxygen the way that he did? Because he could have created it as a different molecule to function the same way. God could have created life to exist on Venus, right? When you come to an omnipotent being, issues like all the parameters and life permitting parameters, these are all wide open. So you have all these other possibilities that have to be explained why they didn't obtain. You know what I mean?
no, I guess I don't understand your question too much, or your answer to that.
So
From what I got
being,
out of it,
an omnipotent being could create ensouled beings capable of glorifying him that live on the sun, right?
Uh-huh.
There doesn't need to be any particular life-permitting conditions for such a being. So in order for a fine-tuning argument to go through, I think there needs to be an explanation of why God didn't create us on the surface of the sun.
So your argument, from what I'm hearing, is, so I don't misrepresent you, is why didn't God do it this way?
Well, because there are infinite alternative possibilities when we're speaking of.
But how does that go against the evidence for God?
Because all those infinite alternative possibilities, those are compatible with the idea of an omnipotent being. No one possibility is ever going to prove the existence of that omnipotent being, because they're all compatible with it.
Wouldn't you agree that if they're all compatible, why do we have to go off of a different model than the one we have now, which is Earth?
I'm not sure what that question means.
Well, basically, what I'm hearing is, why did God create it in this way and not another way?
Yeah.
And two, what I'm understanding with your question is, basically, God could have done it another way that's evidence against him, right?
Well, it's not evidence against God. It's evidence that, like, fine-tuning is like the only possible explanation for why the world is the way that it is. Because why did God fine-tune it this way and not another way? That's either going to be pure necessity or like a brute contingency. If it's pure necessity, then the same thing can be said about the world as it is. If it's brute contingency, also the same thing can be said about the world as it is. The explanation for why God created us to be made of carbon and not silicon is either necessity or contingency.
Why not personal preference?
Well, that preference is going to have an explanation, right, of necessity or contingency.
Well, we know. So I guess to go off biblical standards, we know God is a personal being. So why is it so, I guess, out of the question to believe that he created the world for us in this specific way, because it has its own characteristics that simply life on Venus wouldn't be able to carry. And furthermore, even to drill in that point too, is I don't see how this is, because I guess I don't know how this rebuttals against fine-tuned theory. Because from what I'm hearing is basically because God didn't do it, we can't see that God did this a different way, or that God could do it a different way.
Real quick, are we no longer talking about debate stuff, or we're just kind of doing random stuff now?
Well, no, we're still on we should still be on the incoherency.
I haven't heard anything about incoherency yet, though.
That's why I'm addressing with this one here, because I'm tagging that atheistic argument that fine-tuned theory didn't.
To make this relate to the debate, like I don't think the fine-tuning argument, even if one takes it to be successful, indicates an incoherency within atheism.
Okay, so let's go to even the biological standard, right? In an atheistic model, I don't know what you go by. You go by primal.
Can we have someone else ask a question? We've kind of been on this line for a while now. I don't think the answer.
So what we're basically asking is atheism incoherent? And if you believe it's not, then that's what needs to be addressed here.
Yeah, right now it sounds like you're just saying that atheism is false, which is something else. Which is actually an issue we have to make general.
I'm going on the evidence that there is design order. He does
right. That's an argument that atheism is false, not that it's incoherent.
Yeah, so, yeah. Right. So we want to know what we want to know what no, it's not really. We want to know why it is incoherent or not incoherent. The very belief, not the fact is whether God is true or not, or whether his belief is true, but whether it is incoherent.
Yeah, do you understand what I mean when I say I don't believe in Zeus?
Can we stay on that line?
Wow.
Yeah, do you understand that?
That was my frustration with the debate in general, is that there are a lot of arguments about atheism being false. Almost, I didn't see any that had to do with coherency. So it's like,
it is about
a debate at all.
My attack, real quick, my attack on the point though is you have to disregard all the order and the logical, like with life, for example, make this simple. In the atheistic model of the world, you still have non-life creating life, which you never see any form
Tucker,
of that happening.
Maybe you could explain what you.
So my point is, it'd be illogical to say that there's no God. What would you say?
Maybe you could explain what you think the phrase "atheism is incoherent" means.
I think in a lot of cases you have to disregard major pieces of evidence for at least a creator. And I think it's illogical and incoherent logically to do that. Sometimes you violate, in these cases, Occam's razor, where you have additional information that doesn't matter that you kind of put in the middle as an atheist. Not that you do it, but that's...
okay, so you're basically saying that he's doing away with critical thinking in the fact that he says that atheism is coherent?
Yes, from what I'm hearing, his argument is that atheism is coherent, yet he has to, and not a personal attack, but you have to disregard the evidence that there is order and design, that there's at least some sort of creator. I think it's incoherent, or at least goes against the laws of logic, one of them being contradictory, to being atheist.
If you could point
Is
to a
all
contradiction,
consciousness ordered?
Yeah, that's just I don't know. That's just a dreadful argument. I don't know what else to.
Yeah, if you could point
That's
to,
just
like you
terrible.
mentioned a contradiction, if you could like point at that, that'd be great. The
But
contradiction
I'm not saying you. I'm saying within atheistic arguments, though, some of the ones I've heard have some contradictory and
Which doesn't say anything about
something
atheism as a
yeah.
whole, which is what we're talking about.
Yeah, but to my knowledge, there's different, like, kind of as there's subsects of Christianity, Protestant, and all that.
I mean, just to be clear, like my opening
I've talked to
statement did make a
atheists that
distinction
believe in
between the views of particular atheists and atheism as such. I went to great lengths to establish that. I mean,
It's like no one will actually listen to the debate. Like I'm waiting for anyone to have like a decent objection to go to coherency, and right now we're just getting lots of arguments about, well, this I think it's false. And I think it's like feels like this is a wash, right?
I've got a question for you, Discernible.
Don't worry.
Right? So I've got a question in regard to the incoherency. All right. So I'm looking at the platform by which you are coming from. In other words, I just don't know how one can become an authority on anything that they claim doesn't exist. So what I'm saying there is, how can you logically assume characteristics for anything that doesn't actually exist according to your worldview?
Sorry, what the heck was that?
Don't we?
I think that's the incoherency in this.
Don't we do that with fiction all the time?
I didn't even understand that question.
Did you hear what I said, Discernible? I'm pretty sure I'm talking to you here.
Yeah. Don't we do that with fiction all the time? I don't understand the question. Like,
I'm just saying
we
that,
argue about
if
fictional characters' motivations and moral status all the time.
Yeah, but you're defining the characteristics of nothing, that there is no God.
Sorry, that came out of left field for me. I thought you were talking about discussing God.
Yeah. So what we're doing here is we're defining the characteristics of nothing as if nothing could have all these provable characteristics in the first place, which they can't.
I mean, it was a big chunk of my opening statement to like explain what could or could not be entailed by the claim God doesn't exist.
Yeah, so we're talking about the incoherency here of you making the claim of that God does not exist. When you logically, to do that, you have to assume, how can you logically assume characteristics for anything that doesn't exist? How can you do that for anything?
Characteristics of God have to be posited, in order to be rejected. But I don't see how that's an incoherence.
Richard Dawkins does this well anyway. I see him do it all the time.
Right, like maybe you're getting something at like a claim that atheism is, in a way, always parasitic on confessional theology. That it's always like that atheism always has to involve making a concept out of God in the way that positive confessional theology does, and then denying that particular model.
But to claim that something doesn't exist, you have to be able to look at all possible scenarios, right? And that's something logically that you cannot do.
Well, the thing that I deny is the existence of a necessary being, right? And that's not the existence of some particular being with some set of characteristics. It's just a claim that every being has this logical status.
Yeah, but you can't become an authority on that because you haven't looked at all possible scenarios. So how can you be an authority on atheism? That's incoherency that I see.
So,
in fact, even when you ask that question, or even when you give that statement, it's spotlight to me how incoherent and contradictory it really is. We're not really actually assuming characteristics for anything here, are we?
So is there a contradiction in claiming that there's no contradiction in denying the existence of any particular being?
No, I'm saying that the platform, I don't believe that you have the authority to be able to make the claim that you make.
I'm not sure what authority is for you.
Authority is making a claim on something when you've looked at all possible scenarios. Unless you've looked at all possible scenarios that God does not exist, how can you make that claim on authority